For coming today. Welcome to the February 3rd meeting of the Town of Standish Planning Board. The meeting will now come to order. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are offered. Please notify me if you're unable to hear or see the materials. The board works from a prepared agenda, and this evening we have two findings of fact from the last meeting, the conversion of medical cannabis cultivation to adult use cultivation, and we have Woods excavation. Let's see. We have Woods excavation. The application increased the number of acres that need reclamation at one time. So those are the two finding of facts we have tonight. And then we have the 60-unit old business, the continuation of the 60-unit apartment complex is off of Rose Lane. Then we have two items of new business tonight, which is Woods excavation, a blasting application, and a tear down and rebuild of a home on Meadow Lane, shoreline work on Sebago. So those are that's tonight's agenda. The applicant has the burden of proof to the board that their application is complete and meets all applicable town standards. Any person wishing to address the board may do so by coming up to the podium, stating your name, and please use the podium or one of the provided microphones. The board will open the public hearing for the applicant to present their project. The town planner will provide his assessment of the project and hear responses from the applicant. Board members will then ask questions and hear responses. The hearing will be open to the public for comment, and then the applicant can respond to those comments. The board may receive any oral or documentary evidence, but such evidence is restricted to the subject matter of the agenda item. The board shall exclude irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious evidence. Citizens shall refrain from interrupting other speakers. This meeting is being recorded, and it is very difficult to hear what is being said when multiple people speak at the same time. Citizens shall avoid personal attacks and conduct themselves in a civil, courteous manner as expected by all participants. All questions should be addressed through the chairman. Speakers shall not attempt to engage in debate with other meeting participants. Upon hearing from the public, the hearing will be closed for that application, and the board will deliberate and vote on that application. Following the decision on the application, either towards the end of the meeting or at the board's next regular meeting, the board will prepare written finding of facts and approve them for the records. So that's what we have in store for this evening. We have a quorum, so we are set to proceed. There are no minutes to approve from the last meeting, and let's get into the findings of fact. So the first finding of fact is the adult use cannabis cultivation conversion. Any comments from the board?
Just a question. I mean, I know this is just the finding of fact, but there's been a month. Did we get any additional information from them about the distance between the facility and?
Yes. They've gone out and they've checked, and meets the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Vice Chair, I do notice on condition number 6, the odor management plan is one of the conditions, so that was one of the other concerns that has been addressed.
And do they come back with a licensed engineer?
We don't have that sign off yet, and they have not received any permits.
Okay, but that's still a condition.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the board? So I make a motion that move that the board grant approval under the provisions of the Standish Land Use Code for the site application submitted by Miawi Jane LLC for the proposed adult use marijuana cultivation at Operation Map Lot 10-48 in Standish having found it to meet the site plan review criteria of 181-73, the performance standards of 181-10 and 181-19.4, and all other relative standards of the zoning audience ordinance with the following conditions. So all work shall be in conformance with materials and plans. All required state permits, licensing shall be received and submitted. Code enforcement officer and fire chief must inspect the unit as outlined in 181-19.2P before the issuance of occupancy permit or signing any paperwork for the state showing local approval for adult use cultivation. The approval shall lapse or become void if it doesn't start within 3 years. This approval is dependent upon and limited to proposals and plans contained in the application and supporting documents. Licensed engineer must provide an odor management plan. The applicant needs to verify the distance between the facility and 190 Northeast Road, which Scott just spoke to, and they have done that.
I second that motion.
Any comments? Is all in favor? The next finding of fact is Woods Excavating. This is a gravel pit to, let's see, to increase the area of reclamation. So I move the board grant approval. Oh, is any comments from anybody on the board on this one? I move that the board grant approval on the provisions of the Standish Land Use Code. The application or site plan amendment submitted by Woods Aggregates for the property, map lot 924 on Middle Road in Standish, having found it to meet the site plan review criteria of 181-73, the performance standards of 181-16, and all other relevant standards of zoning ordinance with the conditions listed. And I'll skip the reading of the conditions unless somebody wants me to read them.
No, I'll second that motion.
Is all in favor? That's our two findings of fact for the evening. The next item is old business, 60 unit, 5 apartment buildings is off of Rose Lane. Who is presenting for that?
I thought there was one more condition.
Scott, do you comment first before he goes? Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm Rick Meek with Teardown Consultants. I have here with me Joe Pepin, representing the applicant and owner. I have Travis Nadeau, who's representing Platts Associates, is the architect. And I have John Adams with Barton and Logitis is handling traffic on this project. We received peer review comments last week, and while we have not prepared formal responses for those, we do not anticipate any issues addressing those comments prior to submitting for final. We've also received a copy of Scott's memo, and I'll go through some of that. Again, we don't have any issues with what Scott has stated. Most of the items that Scott has flagged coincide with what some of the peer review comments, particularly regarding septic design and some stormwater issues, or stormwater comments. Based on our discussion in October, we've added a few features to the site plan. We've added a sidewalk along Sunday Drive, where Sunday Drive connects with Rose Lane, heading up to what's going to be Phase 1, which is the first 2 buildings on the upper parking lot, if you will. We've added a trail from that sidewalk across the parking lot, or across the entrance to the parking lot, to connect with Pappas Ice Cream parcel, which is also owned by these applicants. We've also incorporated some recreation facilities in that area, one being a dog park and the other a picnic area. There is a wetland crossing there that we're proposing a covered, not a covered bridge, a boardwalk bridge to cross that wetland for the users of that trail. Scott, if you could go to the next. We've added a Phase 1 grading and utility plan per comments or request from the board. And this shows the limits of impacts for Phase 1. The two buildings and the parking area are identical. The road, the portion of Sunday Drive coming in are identical to the full build-out. The mailbox cluster and the parking spaces associated with that are identical to the full build-out. There's a stormwater feature up at the top of the plan, which is identical to the full build-out. However, we're using a swale to convey stormwater to that feature and its associated buffer. We've added there's a temporary gravel turnaround for people that come into Phase 1 and need to exit, since we don't have that looped connection that is in the full build-out. We've also added another stormwater feature down at the bottom of the plan, collecting the piped stormwater. We're piping it to what's called a level spreader, which distributes the flow evenly, and we're sending that flow through a wooded buffer before it enters the wetlands associated with the stream. The trail, the sidewalk, and the recreation features are part of this Phase 1. So they'll be completed prior to the beginning of Phase 2. Scott, can you go to the next one, next slide? This is just the full build-out, and you can see those similar features, the buffer and level spreader up at the top of the plan, which now in full build-out receives piped flow. The level spreader at the bottom of the plan is replaced by a gravel wetland, which receives the brunt of the bulk of the runoff from the site through a pipe network, and then discharging to the wetlands and the stream below. Next slide, please, Scott. So this is so Scott mentions it in his memo. The original design included and this is all relative to the gravel wetland down on the lower right part of the plan. The original plan included the gravel wetland, a portion of that being in the proposed right-of-way for Rose Lane. And we also incorporated a retaining wall to get some volume for that gravel wetland needed for stormwater, to meet the stormwater objectives of both the town and DEP. DEP actually brought up the question of whether an easement could be granted in the right-of-way for that stormwater being in the right-of-way. I've mentioned that to Scott, and he said, yeah, that could be an issue. The peer reviewer also highlighted that with asking about the stormwater, not only the stormwater being in the right-of-way, but the retaining wall that we have proposed. So after hearing these comments and looking, we brainstormed, and we were able to adjust the grading, or we are able to adjust the grading so that we can pull the treatment part of the gravel wetland out of the right-of-way and eliminate that retaining wall. So this would satisfy, I think, if the town's requirement you know, it would eliminate that retaining wall, so we wouldn't need the easement for that. The actual treatment portion of the gravel wetland is out of the right-of-way, so we wouldn't need an easement for that. Submitted that to DEP as well. They responded that, well, the ponding of the stormwater feature is still encroaching into the right-of-way, so you would likely need an easement for that encroachment. So that is something we're still working with the town on whether an easement can be granted for that ponding of stormwater within the right-of-way. Maybe the next slide, Scott. This wasn't really a comment, but it was just to clarify the plan. This is an off-site utility plan. So the only off-site utility plans we have are underground electric. We're grabbing up, the underground is originating on a pole on Route 25, extending along underground along Rose Lane, and then extending into the site, which is connected to our site on the top right of that plan.
All underground.
Correct.
Yeah.
Next slide, Scott. No changes here, plan and profile. Next slide. I'm sorry, profile of the plan. Landscape plan, what the board did ask, or maybe it was a review comment, was to provide a phase 1 landscaping plan, and we will provide that prior to submitting for final. Next slide, Scott. And I'll just stop there and let Travis speak to the architecture in a moment. We have applications with DEP, both a stormwater and NRPA permit. The NRPA permit is for some wetland impacts that we are impacting some wetlands with the parking lot and with the boardwalk. It's on the order of 2,500 square feet of wetland impact. We have also have a submission with DHHS for the engineered septic systems. We have both comments from DHHS and the town's peer review that we are working to address, and we will address those prior to submitting for final. With that, I'll just let Travis come up and speak to the architecture.
I don't know if any of the renderings made it to the package.
They're on the end.
This is such a brutal way to look at architecture. It's sort of for our business of making the buildings built and checking all the math, but it's not a very personable way to see the buildings. There you go. So this is sort of what we're looking at. It's a very efficient design, but it tries to bring in some nice roof line elements, and this side is demonstrating a strategy for dealing with the grades so that we don't have a big set of stairs running up to the building and a modest entrance, trying to create a nice entry vehicle that's a little easier with grading and would also help meet the town's height requirements. We're trying to stretch those out to allow for these peaked roofs and trying to break up the massing of the building with that entry piece and the modeling of the roof lines to really kind of give this building a breakdown image and you know, where you can find some personalization. You can see where your unit fits into the matrix, and moves the balconies or deck elements to the side, so those aren't out in the front, kind of creating nice semi-private moments out there. And in the floor plan, it's a 4-corner like you see going up everywhere, but usually they're pretty flat and flat roofed and very plain. So we've been trying to elevate that model to a design that we feel would fit well in the community, and kind of create a community, you know, that has some personalization and that people can take pride in and you know, enjoy. I'm really glad to hear about all the recreational pieces. That's really awesome. I think that's what ties these neighborhoods together, you know, architecture and these connections to the community. So I'm glad to see all those coming through. Take some questions later once people have had a chance. Thanks.
Any comments, Scott?
You all set? I don't have anything to add to that. I think that's pretty thorough, and I don't have no new materials have come in since new materials came to you.
I believe I heard him say the third-party response has not come back to you, is that correct?
I mean, that should have been in your packets for the engineering reviews.
But not their response
Oh,
to
no,
it?
no, that just came in just in time to make the packets. I don't think that the applicants had a chance to put together a formal response.
Okay.
So we're still waiting on a number of responses to a number of comments on the stormwater, on the septic, and all those items. I think we did get the DOT response, I think, came in just in time to make your packets, so that they're saying they don't need a traffic movement permit for this. So we should be all set with that.
How about septic, Scott? I know that was the third-party review, or,
So yeah, there's some outstanding comments on the septic systems, and we're waiting on the DHHS review, but that's all in progress.
and you had some questions about the density requirements, with the solar project being next door. Have
Yeah,
that been?
I'd appreciate if they would break down for us the numbers, how they meet those state requirements. I mean, they're not our ordinance numbers, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm not gonna.
I know this is preliminary, I'm just asking, yes.
You open it up to the board. Any comments, questions from the board?
Do you want to stand at that end for a change?
Andrew, sorry, just because of absences, Andrew's like out in like Poughkeepsie over there.
I forgot to look this way.
The one thing that I wanted to ask about was, there's the path to the dog park, but the two recreation areas don't seem to have a path, so, just a gravel path shown there. That was the only thing that I saw.
Okay. Others?
Carolyn, you want to go start? You start.
I have a few. I'm with that, just picking up where you left off, Andrew, with the, we'll get to this later, but can we go back to the sidewalks? Could please.
Wait for it to load.
So before, like, here we have that nice sidewalk to Puppas, but it would be nice to at least have a hash mark so that people recognize that people might be crossing there to that recreational area, since that is right near where everybody's traveling in and out of that parking lot. I thought we had also talked about extending the sidewalk all the way to the perimeter, starting to come down Rose Lane, and having a crosswalk there was something we had talked about before. I know you talked a little bit about the water flow down in this area, and it's hard without the contours on the adjoining lots. I mean, we've heard residents say that there's a water problem with drainage there. And without being able to see the contour lines going forward, it's hard to know where some of that, I don't know, lip level or whatever, I don't know all the terms for it, but it looks like it still might have some water coming this way. And if that's already a flooded area, I would just like more clarification about that. Because we know already that that's a problem. Then, there is no connectivity plan, and anybody that's watches any of these meetings knows that's a really big deal with me. And if you look at that entire project of that whole lot, like we have one sheet where, the lot kind of goes out to the back, And that back end, there's lots of ways that this lot can connect with other projects, with other potentials. I mean, I'm not saying next year, although development does happen rather quickly. But, you know, you have potential connections to Route 35 and to Blake Road further out the back part of that property. You know, there's a lot of area there that doesn't have wetland, kind of can curve around it. And I think that that is a part of our ordinance, to have that connectivity plan that's supposed to be part of the preliminary. So I'd really like to see that developed and be included. Getting to the architecture, I have tried so hard to try to figure out how that building sits on this site. You know, I've played around with different orientations, trying to figure out which end is the mechanical entrance, which end is the front entrance. And I see mechanical, what I think, I don't know really, honestly, what I'm looking at, but it looks like a water line's kind of coming in here, so I don't know if these are the mechanical entrances, and these with all the stairs are the front entrance. I don't know what the orientation is. And with all these grades, I've come to the conclusion that what would be really helpful for me is a 3D photo simulation that's reflective of the current design plan, including the grading, the architectural plan, and the landscape plan, just so we can see how this all fits together, because I've spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, and I'm no closer to that than I was at the beginning. And when I look at that building on that green background that you gave us, that's not in any way representative of the topography that's on that site. So this is a big plan. It kind of is the beginning of some pretty major development within our village center, and I think it would be helpful for everybody to see that. And I'm pretty sure your company is capable of providing that. And then the last thing, oh, and I couldn't tell with the floor buildings if the first floor had any kind of patio that looked like the second and third story had little patios, but I couldn't see on the first floor if there's any kind of not a deck, but a slab or something for them. And then the parking. When I look at the parking, 18120B, there's some stipulations about breaking up that parking lot. And that is not at all factored in. And so right now, we just have this long corridor of tar. And you just don't see that anywhere. I've been driving around like crazy looking at other projects. All the parking lots are broken up. And I did find it in 18120, or 18120B. Since this is, you know, a business venture, you are a company that's renting out units for other people. That's money-making. So I think we need to look at that and fix those parking areas. So right now, those are my comments.
All set, Carolyn?
Yeah.
Mr. Vice Chair, I understand that the Gorham and Palmer memo came out on, basically January 28th, and the case is that, but I had several questions that came from Scott. Have we gotten the capacity to serve letter from the Portland, as this is going to be a sprinkler business, sprinkler or fire protection, and the capacity to serve is critical, because, without it, this isn't going to be like a small business that can drill a well. This is going to be apartment buildings. Has, in a sense, any update on the capacity to serve letter from Portland Water District? Yeah, sorry, Scott, I don't know if you,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't have one.
no, that's what I'm saying. Sorry, it was in your memo, and I know that this is kind of, I apologize for I appreciate, by the way, in a sense, all the work you've done since October, the recreation area, the sidewalks and things like that. There are just some things that apartment buildings do concern me about specifically because, of my background, specifically, having the capacity to serve letter, because it is a, let's say residential unit thing. Have you gotten any update from the Portland Water District yet?
Yeah, I apologize for not speaking to it earlier. So we did speak with the Portland Water District, and if you compared the original design that you saw in October with this design for water layout, I could point out the differences, but those differences were a result of conversations with Portland Water District. They typically do not issue capacity to serve until they've approved the plans, which they are still reviewing. So to answer your question shortly, or after that long discussion, no, we don't have an update on the capacity to serve. We anticipate receiving that once they complete their review.
Okay. The next question I have, Mr. Vice Chair, is waiting back about the fact of, originally there was, as far as connectivity for the public safety or fire safety, have you heard back from our public safety department? Are there any questions, Scott, about, some of the things that were outlined in your memo, but specifically there was two road connections, but it's a little bit easy to see how the fire trucks might get, or it's 700 feet, et cetera, but it's a little bit, phase one is kind of a more backward part of this project, so is there been any questions or concerns for public safety on this project, or any feedback at all?
I've not heard back formally from them at this time.
The other question I had was relating to the phasing. One of the conversations several of us have had over is projects from years past is, when I reviewed the materials you provided us, the phasing, or in a sense the layout. Thank you for explaining phase one and phase two over the thing. Just to some of the points of some of the board members about landscaping, the rest of it never actually coming to fruition. But, I assume when we get closer to final that we'll have more details on the phasing of the project. But the last part, the density requirements, and as I said, the areas of concern I have are related to some of the things as far as stormwater. To Carolyn's point, we've heard in that area of that section, that storm runoff is a big concern. So, but I'm glad to see all the MDOT material, and they're not expecting, in a sense, traffic congestion or an issue, but those were the original concerns from October. So, as I said, those are my feedback or points based on both Gorel and Palmer's January 28th and Scott's memo. That's all I have, Mr. Vice Chair.
anybody else? I have a couple questions. I may have misheard this, but explain again the entrance or behind Papa's, have you addressed accessibility behind Papa's?
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, we had talked about to relieve some of the traffic off of Rose Lane. We brought up last time about accessibility from that end. We didn't decide or anything, but we discussed it last time.
Are you talking vehicular accessibility?
Vehicle accessibility. Or is Rose Lane the only in and out point at this point?
Rose Lane is the only feasible
In and out point,
correction, correct.
okay? But when you discussed it earlier tonight, it was a sidewalk connectivity that you were talking about from one of the units to Papa's.
Correct. There's a trail from Papa's through the site, through the wooded part of the site to connect to the sidewalks in this site.
In the site, okay. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that, that's all. Anybody else on the board?
I just have a comment on drainage. I did see some letters from abutters about the drainage concerns on Rose Lane. But I just want to say that I'm happy to see that you're including stormwater infrastructure and curbing in the portion of Rose Lane that you're developing. I think that will certainly improve the drainage, at least in this project. So that was it. It was just a comment it appears that you're cleaning up the drainage along your project. That was it.
Anyone else before we open it to the public?
Just one more. With a trail going to Puppies, it would also be nice perhaps to have a trail going to the back end of Georgie Jack, the local school that's right there.
Is there,
I think
is
there's
there,
like snowmobile
Wha-
trails through there anyway.
Yeah, there is a undeveloped snowshoe trail, sorry, when,
there,
with the Georgie
well,
Jack.
I was wondering what the, is there a really big hill back there that they would have to traverse to get up to the field? I don't know, but
Pretty gradual.
pretty gradual.
Did you want me to address these comments now, or as best I can, or you want to open it to the public, or what do you want?
Let's open it to the public, and then you can address all of them. How's that? I'm sure there'll be more.
One bucket. Make a motion to open the meeting to public comment.
I'll second it. All in favor? Public.
Hi, my name's Scott McKean. I live at 8 Blueberry Lane, which is in Gardenside Condominiums, which is right next door to this. And a little bit about Gardenside, we're 38 units. It's a plus 55 development. The average age there is about 70 years old. Each of these units pays about $3,000 a year in taxes. We don't have any children in the school. We plow our own roads. These are private roads. And our main concern isn't with the apartments, it's with the through traffic of Gardenside. Right now, Orchard comes down to Gardenside. Gardenside crosses over to Rose, and then Rose comes up to 25. Both Orchard and Rose are attached to 25. We do see some traffic now that comes down through. Primarily, I believe that it's for people that when the roads get blocked up, when 25 is backed up, people going to the childcare will come down Orchard, cross over Gardenside, then go back up to that. And we're real concerned about what's going to happen to our neighborhood when we add another. If you've got 62 bedroom units, how many cars do you expect would be in there? Probably about 100 or so. And they wouldn't be using Rose. And what happens is when 25 gets backed up, our fear is they'll be coming down Orchard, crossing Gardenside, which is our street and our private road. And I think one of the things that we've talked about, how can we eliminate the traffic like that? And, you know, Gardenside is a nice condominium unit. It's the kind of a neighborhood where people go out, walk their dogs, they sit on their porches, we go around, we mingle. It's a very pleasant place. If we have traffic coming down through there, we're going to lose a lot of that. And my thought is, and this is my question to you, can we block off Gardenside at the end of Orchard so we can eliminate that? Is that a possibility?
I personally don't know that answer.
Who would we talk to find
Town
that
council,
out?
sorry, when it comes to Mr.
Yeah,
Hastings.
that's for private roads, and we're gonna have to take a, make sure, talk to Public Works, to Public Safety, and take a look at the approvals from when Gardenside was permitted, just to make sure there isn't anything in there, but that's something, I think that's gonna have to go through town staff.
Yeah. So in order to initiate that, we'd talk to you or Public Works?
Yeah, I guess follow up with me first, and we'll go
Okay.
from there.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Anybody else?
How you doing, Larry Scola? I also live at Gardenside, 4 Gardenside Drive. I'd like to kind of back up to also saying what Scott's saying. You know, our biggest main concern is that traffic, and especially if you guys, or eventually they move that over so it goes up to 35 or Blake Road, that traffic's going to cut right through us on a nonstop basis. So if we ever could block off Orchard Street, that would eliminate that. The only other real big concern I have with the project, I do like what you guys have done with the dog park and the thing, so thank you very much for listening to us. But the parking's really another thing that I have an issue with. If they're gonna have 2 spots for each person, they're not gonna be numbered. And you got a father and mother and a son with a vehicle, and they have a few friends over for the Super Bowl. You know, where are those extra cars gonna go? So it's something, you know, not exactly sure what the fix is on that, how to do it, but that's another concern we do have. If they're gonna start parking down Rose Lane, we're gonna try to get two-way traffic down Rose Lane, or they're gonna try to park in Gardenside on our private land. So those are 2 things we're really gonna worry about, along with, you know, like you were saying, Caroline, the drainage. It'll be nice to see how that drainage is gonna look and how that's gonna keep us away from our property. So, really about it. So, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Coelho from 6 Gardenside. We had spoken back in October meeting, and Andrew, you brought up a couple of points that, excuse me if you've already addressed the answers to these, but I didn't get them. You were talking about a traffic study, and you were concerned about the added traffic from the apartment complex, plus the veterinary shop and the daycare. Do you have any information, any update on that traffic study for us? I know at one time, Rick, you had mentioned that the traffic study you had showed roughly 160 cars a day going up and down Rose Lane from your proposed complex, plus the 38 condos that we have. Most of those condos have 1 or 2 vehicles, but again, just to continue what Scott had shared with you, most of our residents are 60-plus years old, and many of them are out walking on that road. The roadway on Gardenside, I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with that. I know, Andrew, you came out for the site walk, and I remember discussing that with you. That roadway in the wintertime, you can barely get 2 cars to pass one another. It's that narrow. It's not your regular road width. So that's really a concern when we talk about the cars cutting down Orchard. We do have people now, if you come up 25 in the evening, I come home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I can sit at MB Tractor and crawl all the way from MB Tractor to get to Gardenside. It's crazy. In the summertime, with everybody heading to Sebago, now that's before the complex is there. So I'm really concerned with the traffic study and people cutting through Orchard. I really appreciate it. I know we did the site walk, but if somebody could make it a point to come out and take a look at what we're talking about in the peak times. I leave for work at 6:30 in the morning to head to the Portland area, and I can sit at the top of Rose Lane for a good 5 or 6 minutes, and I know you're saying 5 or 6 minutes, who cares? That's at 6:30 in the morning. Now add these people coming in and out of the daycare, 120, 130 cars trying to pull out of the apartment complex. These people that are coming into the apartment complex have one way in and one way out, as do we. Or you cut across Orchard, which is just a very small side street with a couple of little homes and a couple children out there. So we really need to pay a little bit more attention to what we're going to be impacting. It's not just adding these apartments. You're really impacting people's safety. That's really what I want to stress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public would like to comment on this project? Well, with that said, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Is all in favor? Would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, Joe would like to make a few statements on some of those.
Certainly.
Hello, good evening. I'm Joel Pepin, resident of 50 Woodrow Drive, co-owner of the applicant RJP Properties. Just wanted to address a couple of the comments that came through. Thank you for speaking tonight, and also thank you for the time and concern during the site walk. I take your comments as someone who's a neighbor. I've owned the property and the business at Papa's Ice Cream for a long time, and I hope, as I expressed during the site walk, I want you guys to understand that we want to be good neighbors with this development. Obviously, I can't speak to the traffic, what you can and can't do on the private way, but in terms of our project, we don't want to be a burden on your private way. If it's signage or other things like that that we can contribute to make sure it's not an issue, I don't want that to be a negative impact. I do understand that when traffic gets backed up there and people are in a hurry, they find whichever way they can, and that's the reality of the situation. So in addition to what you can and can't do in terms of blocking off garden side, if there's signs that we can contribute, I want to make sure that, as a responsible neighbor, that we do our part. About the numbered parking spaces, I think that's a really good idea, and something we hadn't talked about. I don't know the exact number requirement for our development. I want to say it's something like 1.2 or 1.5 spaces. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, we share the same concern about having too many cars in there. We don't want our traffic lining up on Rose Lane either. So we had designed it the way it is, above the threshold of what is the minimum, to help alleviate that from the get-go. Yeah, I think the last thing I wanted to comment on, in terms of Georgie Jack, maybe Rick will have a comment. My son's at Georgie Jack. I love the idea of having connectivity to the school. I know on our lot, there's a little bit of wetlands there. Then also, I just looked at it on Google Maps. There is a good length of trees between the property line with Georgie Jack and then getting to the back of the playground. And so I don't know what it would take. If there is a way for us to connect to it on our lot, I don't know what it would take from the town or the school department to take their connection and run to the school. But there's there's a fair amount of linear footage of woods from our line to the back area of the playground. I love the idea, but I just wanted to say that there's probably some work that's going to need to happen on the Georgie Jack lot as well.
Yeah, and I know that they used to have a snowmobile trail that they would clear, and they would go in there so that they could groom like a cross-country ski trail when the kids were starting to try to do that. So I don't really know what's there or not, but if something like that exists, that'd be fabulous.
It's something that does exist, and when I lived at Papa's Ice Cream, which has been about 10, 12 years, upstairs in the apartment, there's an ATV trail that comes to the back of Duncan, and sometimes there will be traffic where 4x4s, quads will come to the back of the Papa's lot. I haven't seen, from what I recall, I didn't see anything going anything closer to Georgie Jack than that trail that went to Duncan. And I don't know if that's grown in since I had walked back there with my dog.
But even getting there, because the next thing behind Duncan is the big field at Merritt House, which connects right to the school. So, I mean,
10 years ago, to Carolyn's point, sorry, when my daughter was attending Georgie Jack, they did snowshoeing, and I snowshoed from the Georgie Jack property to Papa's.
Yeah.
But it is an ATV trail to that point, but I don't know what state it is in now. But years ago, there was a trail, but I'm sure the locals, in a sense, snowmobile club could, provide more details if you wanted to pursue it. But it was there years ago.
Yeah, so we're open to it. I'd like to hear Rick's comments relative to the wetlands, specifically on our side of the lot. I guess the final 2 points I'll make real quick is just, I read the concerns from the abutters with the drainage. We share the same concern. I brought it up to Rick today. It seems like from what I read that was submitted to the town back in October, there was some excavation that happened on the north, I guess it'd be the south side of 25, on the other side of 25, that complicated matters. I believe it came from some residents on Orchard that, I don't know how far back they are from the road, but I feel like they're more in line with the proximity to 25 as Papa's is. One thing that Rick reminded me, and he can maybe speak to the detail of it, but whatever's running off from our lot right now as it sits to the garden side, Rose Lane side, we're gonna be, after our development, there'll be less runoff, and maybe Rick can speak to that in more technical terms. And then I think the last thing I just want to say for the folks, and we talked about it during the site walk, you know, for all the folks who call Orchard Drive home and Gardenside Remedies home, you know, especially Gardenside Remedies, 38 units. We were originally looking at 6 buildings here, site complications, we're down to 5. We're not big-time developers, we want to be good neighbors, we plan to hold this and operate this for a long time. You guys call home a development that a developer had put forward at some point in time, and we're trying to do the same thing here. We deal with the traffic too, and it is complicated. You know, and I think it's not just our proposal, it's not the development at Gardenside. I mean, the whole community has grown a lot over the past 13, 14 years, and it's a bigger conversation than I think just the one project, and I don't know what the ultimate solution is, but to that point, what I wanted to end on was, we do hope that there'll be some connectivity through our project here back out onto 35. And I know that's something the town's wanted on both sides of the intersection for a long time. So for the traffic concerns that we all have experienced, whether this happens or not, I think an approval on a project like this, and perhaps others in town, although they will maybe, you know, there will be more cars in the area, ultimately will open the door for more connectivity, which I think will be the ultimate relief valve in all the traffic that we deal with. So that's what I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just take these in order, and forgive me if I repeat or if I skip something, certainly flag me down. To Andrew's question, yeah, we can certainly make a visual cue of a path connecting the trail that we're showing to the dog park and to the picnic area. We can certainly add crosswalk signage for that crosswalk to access the trail.
Yeah, just the paint even. You know,
Paint
just
or
a-
signage would,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll address that. A crosswalk on Rose Lane and sidewalk to the limits of our project is not an issue either. We can do that. I missed that. I either didn't remember it or didn't write it down, missed that conversation, so I apologize. Scott, if you could switch to the, I think I have an overall grading plan that might address some of the, I think that one. And similar to what Joel had mentioned, our site is at the end of Rose Lane, which is roughly in line with the buildings. You know, if you draw a vertical line on our plan, our site development is roughly in line with the buildings that are in Gardenside. You know, we're all restricted by the wetlands and the stream that are back there. But it also, as Joel mentioned, all the runoff from our site is collected in. We have curbs on both sides of the road. There's storm drainage network. So all the runoff from the developed portion of the site is collected in that drainage network and piped to this proposed gravel wetland that we've designed. The release of that water from that gravel wetland discharges to the forested wetland, you know, to the forested area just upstream of the wetlands, and from there it runs into the stream. Joel wanted me to explain that. So without this development, you know, the number's not exact, but say in a 25-year storm, 10 cubic feet per second are coming off of this site and flowing to that stream. After we've developed the site and routed it to this gravel wetland, we're discharging to that stream 10 cubic feet per second or less at the same, you know, we're discharging runoff at the same rate that is coming off the site as today. without any development. And that is how we're instructed to design projects by Chapter 500 stormwater law, by most towns, including Standish, have an ordinance that requires your peak rates of runoff to be at or below existing levels, and that's what we've done. Joel mentioned a little bit that the drainage concerns, it sounded like, are currently happening, and it sounds like it's mostly because of development on 25 and even to the south of 25. All of our runoff is directed towards the stream, which is to the north of the garden side. The development of this site is not directly impacting garden side. As far as the runoff, in that area, just to the south of our property line or east of our property line, on the bottom of this page, currently there's a ditch along Rose Lane that runs out towards the back of the site. We're intercepting that ditch with this road network and our development, but we're transferring that water through pipe network to its original location in a basically a ditch that runs from Rose Lane down to the stream. So yes, we are collecting it and redirecting it, but the impacts are non-measurable. We're just rerouting that runoff to a different location, or the same location, just by a different path.
I guess my concern was not fully understanding this, so sorry about that. But if you have more volume just because of all the tarred surface and all that, right? So even if it's at the same rate or less, but the volume is more, so it's longer time frame, and that does tend to be an area that floods because the stream gets full and leaves its bank. Because it's longer time frame, how does that impact the potential flood area in that garden side area?
You're absolutely correct. It's two different conversations, peak rates versus volume. Anytime you develop a site, you're going to increase the volume. It's just an impervious surface, more volume runs off than a non-impervious surface. So the strategy for that is to construct a BMP like this gravel wetland to collect and detain that to the peak rate level. So you can't decrease volume unless you don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So to mitigate that, you have to detain it, and that's what we've done.
Thank you.
I know in tab 2, the January 9th material, tab 2 is specifically devoted to the stormwater. On the cases that I did notice that, disposal on page 5, you have made plans, and I trust in Patrick for his expert opinion on it. But tab number 1 always talks a lot about the MDOT and the, in a sense, the traffic there. It seems that we still have a lot of concerns about the traffic study. You provided on January 9th all the traffic data. It said Barton seems to, in a sense, indicate that, we're within the guidelines of the MDOT as far as, let's say, increase in volume. But there does, I'll be honest, since page 4 of, Scott's memo was talking about the 104 spaces and things like that, the numbers even though they're far in excess of what you'd expect on parking spaces, I think 60 units, 104 spaces is a little, I would hate to say it, just the math doesn't, worries me a little bit as far as if you have 60 units, 2 cars, that's not, 104 spaces, it's a little bit more. Even though it's allowed, but although the section, as I said, tab 1 of the January 9th thing goes all about traffic flow and the rest of it. To my point, I've been on that road at that time of the day. The amount of traffic for this project concerns me, especially because it's proximity to Georgie Jack. but also because of its, proximity to Hannaford and everything else. That's a busy road. And at 4 o'clock in the day, going the other way, it's one of the few traffic jams we have, so, to several people's points. More traffic in that one area, it does concern me. But as I said, you provided on, the tab 1, all the information that I reviewed, so I have no questions there.
Yeah, and I'll have John come up and talk to the traffic, the concerns from the public. I wanted to finish going through the comments that they had previously.
Okay.
Scott, could you put the subdivision plan up? I think it's maybe the second page of the. Yes, yep. So Carolyn, you asked about connectivity, and so so the proposed right-of-way for Rose Lane, we're terminating on the south side of the wetlands and the stream for this particular development, but we're extending that right-of-way. That right-of-way extends across the stream, and the solar project that came forward before on this property in the back was approved. Scott, help me out when it was approved, but
2 years ago, three years ago?
yeah, that sounds right. So
That's on the side part, right?
on that plan, it's on the right side of the plan?
Right,
Yes.
yes.
On the north side of the stream, on the north side of the wetlands, that's where the solar panel project was approved to go. So there's we've done a little bit of realignment, but that's the same right-of-way, Rose Lane. You can see Rose Lane on the left there. We're extending that right-of-way into the site, doing somewhat of a 90-degree sweep turn, and then extending across the wetlands to access the solar project. But to your point, the right-of-ways were set up in this project to provide that connectivity someday for connection to Cowan Drive or Road, which connects to 35. We don't have any plans to build that or connect that immediately, but that was part of the approval of this solar project, was to set that connectivity. So we're just honoring that connectivity with that right-of-way connection to Cowan Drive or Cowan Road. Now, we can show, or we can put I don't know how we can do it without impacting the solar project, but we can show some connectivity to the project, the property to the north, if the board so chooses, but.
My mistake. I thought all this was solar. I did not realize it went there as well.
Okay.
That's really a travesty, actually. I was very short-sighted.
I'll let Travis talk about the photo simulation and the patios. The reference to section 181-20, breaking up of parking, we can certainly accommodate that. I had missed that as well. I'll read through that section. Bear in mind that, we'll do the breakup as necessary, but we're gonna lose parking, which adds to the.
And just to be clear, that section does not apply to this project.
Okay.
I don't agree with that,
Does not
Scott.
apply to this zone, as we've discussed on previous projects. It also does not apply to residential projects.
And you know what, when this is a business, because these are not homes that people buy, it is units
how
that
the
they
zoning
sell.
defines these
That's
things.
your interpretation, but I disagree with that. And
I
I think if,
understand that, Carol.
yeah,
But it doesn't apply to this project.
I don't agree.
I think I addressed the capacity to serve Portland Water District. I'll wait to hear back from Public Works on their concerns, or if there are any, about the phasing and, the temporary turnaround, and we think there was discussions early on about 2 connections, but we feel that we've provided circulation for emergency vehicles in the full build-out. So I guess in our mind, it's a question of whether Public Works has an issue with the hammerhead turnaround, the temporary hammerhead turnaround in Phase 1. But if they have concerns about this single connection, we'll certainly look to try to address that as well.
The second turn looks really tight.
Second turn.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not really, like, labeled. Right across the crosswalk to the,
I guess to address that, I'll provide a turning template to,
yeah, it with the dumpsters and stuff, it looks pretty tight through there. Whereas the first one, you've got, it just appears that you have more turning radius.
sure, we'll provide a turning template to demonstrate that the largest emergency vehicle can.
Okay. I'm sure that's what Charlie would say if he's here. If he was here. He's always looking for those things.
And I think this may address one of the comments either in Scott's memo or maybe the first memo regarding the width of Sunday Drive. We're proposing 24 feet, where the ordinance for a private road is 22, if I'm correct, if I'm.
Yeah.
Well, we're requesting 24 just for that reason. This is more acting like the areas in front of the units are acting like a parking lot, so we're using the 24-foot wide aisle width, and we're just carrying that width through the whole alignment of Sunday Drive. But if the board feels that do we have to ask for a waiver for that, or?
No, it was just a comment on the sort of street network in that the entrance to the complex will be wider than Rose Lane is. And I just wasn't sure if that's something the board felt concern of and how the looks and the road network works out. If the board has no concerns, there's no issues.
Todd, you had a question about phasing of the project. I think to address that, so we've provided a Phase 1 site plan, a Phase 1 grading and utility plan, a full build-out site plan, and a full build-out grading utility plan. We have a full build-out landscape plan, so I think we need to provide you a Phase 1 landscape plan, and that would satisfy your comment?
Well, the concern of the board in the past has been the fact that when it comes to phasing, as I only joined the board in June of last year, is like, there are projects where several board members have brought up there that were in the past, where, because the phasing wasn't, let's say, provided at a preliminary stage, there was no kind of checks and balances for landscaping and other things, and I can see that being my concern right now, is that at least with Phase 1, the way this is set it out, if we do have more concrete, or at least guidance from a timeline standpoint, it would allow that.
Okay. I think you echoed some of the same concerns about stormwater that Carolyn had. Hopefully I've addressed those. Frank, you asked about accessibility, so no vehicular access, just the pedestrian
Okay.
access to Papa's from the site.
Understand.
Sidewalk connectivity. I'm not sure what, you had mentioned sidewalk connectivity. I'm not sure what the comment was.
Is that the comment about extending down into Rose Lane, or was that?
That was Carolyn.
Yeah, that was Carolyn, yeah.
I'm not sure I brought up sidewalk connectivity. If I did, I've forgotten that I brought it up.
Okay, well, I'll review the,
Yeah.
review the tape. Patrick, you had similar questions about, or you're appreciative of our stormwater, but do you have any comments or questions about the stormwater?
I think one of the biggest issues by the Rose Lane 25 intersection is there's just no ditching. There's no infrastructure. So any drainage just kind of pools in the road. It would be fantastic if there was some ditching throughout there. It's a public right-of-way. It's property not owned by the applicant. I do see you're putting underground electric kind of within that right-of-way, just adjacent to the road. If there was any potential for some ditching to go on that road, I think we'd want to understand that now before there's underground electric. I mean, my preference would be that there would be some ditching on that road. I would rather see above-ground electric poles than underground with some ditching, just to clean up the drainage in that area. Completely understand that's not owned by the applicant. It's more of a town problem. But for the drainage of the actual improvements that you're doing, I think this looks great. Curbing, actual catch basins and piped infrastructure, outletting to a gravel wetland, which is one of the best treatment BMPs out there. So I don't have any concerns on the development that you're proposing, but it's more of just the access through Rose Lane that's an existing issue. So it's not really a comment or a concern to you, but just more just overall.
All right, thank you for clarifying. And then you had mentioned a connection to the school, and yeah, like Joel said, we can certainly show connection from our site to the property line. There are opportunities to do that. It's just what happens what happens on the school property, we can't control or dictate, I guess. I'll have John discuss the traffic concerns from the public. We've had a lot of discussion about parking number, and can you call it that or maybe I have it here.
There's some along the road, right? So you have 120?
I believe it's 120.
Yes, 120 is the number I had in my mind, so,
That just includes the on-street on
yes,
Rose Lane.
yes. So we're at two per unit. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, the ordinance requires, is it 1 per unit? So I understand the practicality of 60 units and people with multiple cars and all that, and so that's what we've tried to accommodate is those extra vehicles by putting twice as many parking as required by the ordinance. So we have a conflict of thoughts that, provide more parking because we're gonna have a parking problem. No, the ordinance says provide less parking, so we've decided to provide the more parking, and hopefully you guys can agree with that. I'll let the town speak to the closure of Orchard Road. So the numbered parking, Joel, we hadn't thought of, that wasn't something that occurred to us, so we can certainly look at numbered parking. Again, there was questions about extra parking. Do we go to 2.1 parking spaces per unit, and we physically don't have the room, so, where does the board stand on extra parking, I guess? Traffic study, I'll let John speak to that. The width of Orchard, maybe the town can speak to that. That's a private road, so I don't know. I'll let John speak to the summer traffic and the wait times on Rose Lane. So maybe Travis, you could come up and address the Caroline's comments about the architecture regarding the photo simulation and the patios or decks on the first floor.
If you could flip down to those rendered images, I think we can improve these renderings with some modeling of the parking areas. Is there another one, or is that the only one? hoping it came around to the other side. Is there one more? No. Oh, there you go. Okay, so the idea is that we have two entrances, one on either side, an uphill and a downhill. So on the buildings that would be on Rose Lane, where you'd really want to see a nice front door and not an embankment, that's where we had the previous strategy of cutting in that nice doorway to get in there, and that could get through the whole building. These don't have a utility room at the ground level like you're used to seeing, so there's care here to try to locate those mechanical services so that they're not up front, and you got a nice building experience. If you go to the upper version, so this shining 3 stories, flat site, and then the other one has the more sloping site where we're trying to couch that entrance. So it's a way to accommodate a 10-foot grade change across the footprint of the building, but offer people a more at-grade experience coming in and out of the building. And makes it so that the back isn't feeling so much like a back. You can come in from the back, and especially where on Rose Lane, it'll be facing the street. You really like to see an entrance there.
Yeah, but there's like 20 stairs or 21 stairs.
This
or
is a
18
strategy to get
stairs.
rid of the stairs. So instead of stairs, which is a kind of awful experience for a front door, we would cut in an entrance and bring grade down within the building to accommodate a more gentle slope to the front door.
So
or
we-
be a second front door.
So even the first floor has to go up some stairs once they get inside, right?
No, well, the idea here is that the 10 feet would be accommodated from one floor to the next, and then there'd be an internal stair to get you through the building. So,
So the first floor, they would not need any stairs?
correct.
I know.
Grade entrance at the first floor, and then the backside, we'd have a modified grade entrance at the lower level. And sometimes these models aren't so great at showing
No.
grades, so I think a section would actually be where you can kind of see, here's this side, here's that side, and here's how it works through the building, and here's how we're working it along the sides of the building. And then, to your point, we can model in the parking areas so you can see the actual paved areas in these images.
Carolyn, also to address your confusion is our grading doesn't match this.
No, that's true, it doesn't. And so I think this is kind of difficult to make sense of, because the grading that I see here is far different than this nice green kind of flat area.
So we're going to update our grading to match this seems to be the from the architectural standpoint, the preferred layout. So we haven't, but we will update our grading to match this. So hopefully it'll be less confusing. And like Travis said, we'll provide a section that may show that more clearly than this 3D model.
Yeah, the grassy texture there hides, a lot of grading. That one image where you have a front, there's a shot straight to the front, I think it's right below this one. That kind of shows it a little better, but it's still hard to see. So we'll get it to exactly, we'll have a shot, here's this building, and there's how it works.
I can appreciate your reluctance to do a 3D photo simulation, but I think that's what I'm going to ask the board to vote for, because none of this even has any kind of landscaping along the grading plan for us to get a realistic picture of what it is we're trying to approve.
Sure.
And I feel like with past projects, we've voted on things that we didn't clearly understand. And I'm tired of doing that. I want to see what it is we're looking at.
Well, honestly, it's going to make this look even more gorgeous if I have my
Then-
guys spend another few hours putting all the landscaping and really dialing it into the
Hello,
inch.
Yeah,
And I'm really impressed with the landscaping plan. I think the package is going to fit really nicely with this building. Right now, it looks a little barren and stark. I'm just in control of the architecture, so I'll definitely take that opportunity to pull in the landscaping and
Grades.
situate all the grades
Yeah.
and have it just match right up. The computer software is amazing, so it's really just a matter of downloading his his grades into the machine, and it models it perfectly. There isn't a lot of work there, so we'll bring in the trees, we'll match the species, we'll match it right up.
And the parking spaces, sorry, to the other.
Of course,
point.
all of it.
That looks like a lake. I was like trying to figure out like whether or not like it was, you know, gonna have a pond in front, not that
Yeah.
you can store water runoff there.
It's just the bottom of the.
I know.
When I'm designing these things, I like to have them stripped down so that we're not being fooled by flags and cute cars and people walking down the street. You know, the architecture matters and first, and then we can bring in the noise. But I think for this study, this setting, that I think that's very appropriate to sort of bring the site and the building together and give you some shots and we can map where the vantage points are, you know, facing this way, facing that way.
That would be awesome, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and yes, we will have patios on the ground level. So the strategy is to have just like a paver style patio, so that people come in and out of the building. But the idea isn't to create a playground or a place to camp out necessarily. It's more of a kept grounds, but we do want to offer that opportunity to step outside.
Yeah, just like having that flat floor of the balcony up above, just that flat floor, yeah.
But this isn't, the idea is to not have the sort of 10 by 10s that you see on
Right.
some of these where you got the pink flamingos and the couches and craziness. So
Yeah,
it'll be sort of low profile.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One idea I had for parking was if one of the tenants is having a party or needing extra parking and can see that there isn't enough there, you have Papa's there, and they can just give them a call and ask, can I have a few people park and walk the path that's already there?
Great minds think alike.
And, you know, so
Uh,
this park, and I mean, and there's, I mean, I don't want to speak for other businesses, but then there's also the vet and the daycare, and the daycare's got nobody at it, you know, in the evening when you have parties or the weekend.
We don't control.
So
we
it's
don't-
all parking space that just doesn't get used.
We're not able
most of the
to secure rights to park in the daycare's parking lot, but Joel whispered to me that, hey, we could do overflow parking in the back of Papa's, and that could be available for this site, so we'll
Yeah.
try to incorporate some language that quantifies that on our plans. And I'll just have John come up and speak to some of the traffic. Tab 1. So they, I don't know if you were taking notes, but they had just, Todd had some comments, and then the public had comments.
Yeah. Good evening, thanks. My name is John Adams. I'm a senior transportation and traffic engineer with Barton & LaJudas, working with the project team. And another good thing is I live at just over the border on Dingley Spring Road in Gorham, so I'm over here a lot. I do my shopping over here. I'm, you know, up at that intersection at 25 and 35. So first of all, yes, I think everyone's acknowledges there's delays on Route 25, especially in the afternoons. You know, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and especially more towards the summertime. There are queues there. But I would also say this project is, you know, it's not a high trip generator. For this project, we did what we call a traffic assessment level study. We typically do those for those that are, I just call them low trip generators. Obviously, there's a threshold when you get to 100 peak hour trips that you need to do more formal studies. You need to get a permit from Maine DOT. But we did look at the trip gen for this particular project, and we utilize the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation rates, which is accepted by Maine DOT for all the projects. And based on this type of multifamily housing, it estimates there's going to be about 24, 25 trips in the AM peak hour of the roadway. So like between 7 and 9 in the morning, you have your commuter peak hour. And then in the afternoon, you also have a afternoon commuter peak hour between 4 and 6. So during that peak hour, it predicts there'll be about 31 trips. Now, keep in mind, some are going in, some are going out. In the morning, more are going out than are coming in, and then in the afternoon, more are coming in than are going out. So from that aspect, it was a low trip generator. I think the traffic peer reviewer, agreed with that assessment. The DOT also agreed with the trip generation calculations and methods that were used. Then we also look at site distances, so we check the site distances looking out of Rose Lane onto 25. The good news there is there's good site distances, which help when you're waiting and you're trying to, especially when you're going left out of the site. The third thing we look at this traffic assessment level is we look at crash data from Maine DOT. And from when we first submitted, I think, which was back earlier in '24, I think a comment we got from the peer reviewer was, hey, can you update your crash data and look at the latest data available? So we tend to look at 3-year periods of crash data, and that's how Maine DOT does their analysis. And so what DOT says is if there's an intersection or a section of roadway and it has a minimum critical rate factor of 1 or greater, and it also has a minimum of 8 crashes in a 3-year period, you have to have both of those things true. Then they consider it a high crash location. So it has a crash rate and a number of crashes that stick out statistically compared to other similar intersections and roadways. And so I'd say the other good news was there are some crashes on the section of 25, from Orchard up to 35, but it's not at a rate that, gives it a high crash location listing by Maine DOT. So we look at those 3 things, the crash data, we're not seeing significant safety issues out there right now. The trip generation isn't very high, and the site distances are good. But we also acknowledge there are some delays on 25, and for everybody on that section, trying to go left out of your site, there's going to be some delay experienced. So I think really what needs to happen here, because there's a lot of projects that are coming into the town now. Some of them are officially in the queue, some of them are coming. The intersection of 25 and 35 is really the sort of the culprit here. Everybody knows, you've got some long backups on multiple approaches there. My understanding is the town has begun to look at that intersection in a more formal way, and they're looking at it from a kind of a long-term improvement perspective. And I think it's going to take that level of improvements to reduce the delay and the congestion experienced at the intersection, which is going to benefit, honestly, 25 on both sides of the intersection, and a couple thousand feet of 35 on both sides of the intersection. So that's why we did the level of traffic study we did. We did a traffic assessment level study. And I don't know if I'm specifically addressing everyone's comments, but I just kind of wanted to give a quick overview. But I don't know if there's, or Rick, was there a specific question I didn't answer? Sorry. Somebody did ask about safety.
Can you comment can you make any comments on the cut-through traffic?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I really like the idea of putting up some sort of, putting up some signs, and I think that will deter some people. However, people do what people do, but I certainly would be willing to help the team develop some signage. And I think the residents there in the private would, and assume, if you're comfortable with something at the end of Orchard that says, something along the lines of, private property, no through traffic, or private driveway, no through traffic, I'm certainly willing to help develop some signs there to help with that. And I don't doubt that it happens occasionally. Folks are using that to get around. But I do like the idea of closing it down. I wasn't sure, just sitting here and not knowing the neighborhood, if you would be comfortable doing that, but I'd be certainly willing to help in any way, work with the town or Public Works to look into that and make that happen.
So to be clear, what were some of the actions? What was, from your analysis, what was actionable? What changes, what actions would you take, or are you recommending to take, based upon your analysis in regards to the traffic study that you did?
Yeah, so what the result of our study was because we're a small trip generator, we're not proposing any significant changes to, say, the intersection of Rose Lane or 25, to help with what's going out on 25 right now, because we're such a small contributor to what the issues are.
Understand, okay. Just wanted to be sure that,
Yeah.
that you didn't have any other actions that was within the purview of this project.
What would the threshold be to be considered a high trip generator?
That's a good question. It's somewhat relative, but I would say that the bar is set at 100 peak hour trips, and that was set by Maine DOT a long
And you're
time
at,
ago.
and you're at like 40, you said?
We're at like
peak.
25 in the AM peak hour of the roadway and 32 in the PM peak
32.
hour of the roadway.
Andrew, the tab 1 of the January 29th, the max I saw in the 4 charts was like 60. But that was my question. We didn't have that in material in October, but in this January packet, they provided tab 1 has all the Barton information he's talking about.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Question.
Yeah.
I know you didn't study this, but it was brought up. Is it common to see kind of like a physical barrier on private roads to, alleviate cut-through traffic? In your experience, have you seen it in any neighborhoods around here?
I can't say I've seen it in neighborhoods around here. I've seen it, I've seen it in some neighborhoods down in Connecticut. I have relatives down there. I'm down there a lot. I've seen folks do some temporary things. I'm not sure if I'm crazy about that, because I think there's probably some concerns with consistency, but I'd also leave it to the folks in that development. Is it something you want to be, it's a movable, so at times it would be in place and other times maybe it wouldn't be. I don't know. I think there's more conversations that need to be had, but I'm hearing permanent, so.
That limits, your access of how you travel if there's a barrier.
Yeah, and I've seen some communities have, some sort of gate that opens for the residents and doesn't for other folks. I've also seen use of traffic calming devices which you'll have to go over these too, but I've seen speed bumps get put in multiple places, and folks, when they're taking their little cut through, suddenly, they don't want to do that, plus it slows everybody down. However, you will be going over those too. So that's another thing we could do to discourage is some traffic calming elements, which I would say some sort of speed bumps, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I'm certainly willing to work with the project team and the development there, find some solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So,
Where do we go from here?
we have a potential motion to find the application complete and then work on the actions that we discussed. Or, at the moment, not find it complete. And then list those items that are important to us before we find the application complete, i.e. the next meeting. So what are you guys thinking in regards to the application being complete, which is the step before granting preliminary approval?
What does Scott think first?
Yeah, I think there's a number of elements that the board's going to need for approval, and certainly in past projects, you've been leaning toward having much of the engineering review settled for preliminary approval, which there are, as we've talked about here tonight, a number of outstanding comments there, and some things that are being tweaked still. So that's up to the board's view how much you want settled before preliminary. It has to come back for final anyway. So it's certainly something you can entertain. But I think based on the last couple of projects you've done, there's definitely the preliminary we just gave to the Woodlands, for example. You sent them back for another round of the engineering review before you granted preliminary. But it's really the board's call at this point. I think most of the items that they're required to submit have been submitted. It's just now the fine tuning.
Well, one big piece that I think is still out is the calculations for density. That's pretty important. And I also think there's been a lot of discussion about the height. And I think having that material presented to us, showing us how the buildings would sit on this grading within this lot would help a lot. And I think not just with the board, but with the whole community to get a good visual of what's being proposed. So I personally would feel more comfortable waiting until we had that.
Okay? Anybody else?
I don't think we're asking anything, Mr. Vice Chair, that can't be resolved by our next meeting. Sorry, a lot of these things are just fine tuning little points.
Agree with that?
And I'd say that, you know, they should be able to come back. I mean, sorry, we just got a lot of this stuff last week, but a lot of it has been updated since October. They're on the right road. I just think in the next month, they should be able to, by March, they should be able to remove all the preliminary concerns we have to let them move forward after that.
What do you think, Patrick?
I'm comfortable with the preliminary approval tonight, based on the, what's submitted, knowing that they're coming back.
I'm fine with preliminary.
So with that said, I'd like to make the motion to find the application submitted by Teradyne Consultant on behalf of RR and JP Properties LLC for subdivision and site plan review of the property at map 10, lot 61, complete for preliminary review. And then I'm thinking that we hold off on the preliminary approval until we get what we just said at the next meeting. Call the application complete and leave it at that for tonight with a list that we'll go through here in a second that they have to have before they get preliminary approval.
Is that what you're thinking, Todd, too?
No, as I said, I would like to see some of the stuff. Carolyn has brought up a couple points, and I think that holding off for a month, just on the preliminary, just once we say yes to a lot of these things without things defined, just makes me nervous. As I said, I think 1 month is not radical. As I said, I would be more, I'd like to see some of this stuff before I vote yay.
Okay?
But we're talking about two different things, I think, right?
Yeah.
The completeness,
I don't think it's complete, sorry, Andrew,
it's
not
not
gonna-
complete,
Yeah.
okay.
I think there's a couple of major issues. I have issues, density and some of the other things just make me concerned.
So I misunderstood what you were,
Just an administrative
Thanks.
question, if the board proceeds with, if they do not, or if they accept it as complete but do not grant preliminary, Scott, what is the submission deadline for being on the March meeting? And as an active project, are we held to the same 3-week?
I need as an active project, we don't usually hold you to quite as hard a deadline, though we need it in that area, just have time for staff review and then board review.
Okay.
So you'd have 2 weeks, give or take a couple days from now to get materials in for the March meeting.
Okay.
So-
Generally, the board doesn't set a date certain. You've given them your concerns. If you want to table it for more information, then that's up to the applicant to submit more information when they're ready for it. I think they've certainly shown that they're working on it, and I don't think we need to worry about them dragging this out for a long time, which is the only time I usually counsel the board to put more hard dates on it, so that we don't have things hanging around forever. But they're certainly working to get through. If you want to see this come back for another meeting before you accept it as complete and grant it preliminary, then that's there. The timeline, I think, is up to them on what they can get done.
Okay, so with that said, I move that we table this until the next meeting.
Until they've submitted.
Until they, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Until they submit what's been requested.
I'll second that motion.
Hopefully that'll be the next meeting, but again, that's what they can get done.
Is all in favor?
Sorry, I'm tabling it, yeah.
Do you have a clear understanding? We talked about a lot of different things. Do you have a clear understanding of what you need to put together for that next meeting? Okay. Then we are done with this topic.
Officially know it's been extended.
The next item is Woods Excavating a blasting application.
This is less.
Good evening. Greg McPherson, Woods Excavating. And Chris Woods, Woods Excavating. So tonight, we're here in front of you to renew a blasting application that we previously had for the past 365 days. According to the Land Use Code 16.1B7, these permits are good for 365 days, which we are coming up on in the next couple of days. This permit is for a conditional use permit that we hold in Standish at 249 Middle Road in a active gravel pit. As you can see, our blasting application is almost identical to the one we submitted a year ago. It's just the continuation of our operations. On our end, it's just a formality to continue our day-to-day operations as we have been for the past year. Nothing's changing on our end, just it's an ongoing process that takes time with constraints of money, geological considerations, and weather considerations. So with that, it's pretty basic on our end, just continuation of what we've been doing, and looking forward to any questions that the board might have.
Questions from the board?
Just when it looked like you said that you were thinking about having 10 different times that you were blasting. Did I read that properly?
Yeah, the estimated times of blast that we have in our application is 10.
Yeah. So we don't have those dates. I mean, I saw somewhere where we're supposed to have the dates, but that's something you would just communicate with the town in advance.
Yeah, so I email Jackie at least 24 hours ahead of time. In the previous year, I emailed Jackie 11 times prior to blast. Some of those got delayed and canceled. So we've actually blasted less than that in the previous year. On the application, that's an estimate, and in the past year, we were below that estimate.
Thank you.
Scott, do you have anything you want to add in regards to blasting?
I don't have any concerns. The town hasn't had any complaints about operations in the pit or the blasting in the pit. They've given us all the notice they're required to give. We've had no issues.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion, open it up to the public.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Public, any questions in regards to blasting at Woods Excavation? That said, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
All in favor? So with that said, I move to find the application for the blasting permit as submitted by Woods Excavation to be complete as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Next.
In conclusion, I also move the board grant approval of the blasting permit submitted by Woods Excavation under the provision of the Standish Land Use Code, having found it meets the criteria and standards of 181-16-1 and all of the relevant standards of the zoning ordinance with the following conditions. All blasting must be done in accordance with performance standards. Notice requirements is of 181-16.1C and 181-16.1D. The approval will expire 365 days from the date of approval, as specified in 181-16.1B.7, and all conditions of previous approvals for the gravel pit operating at the site are included in this approval and remain in effect.
I'll second it.
Any other comments? Is all in favor?
Just one administrative question. Is that permit granted today, or is that a permit granted upon findings of facts? That's one question I had from previous years. Looked like last year, the permit was dated, the date of approval, the finding of facts was 30 days later.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's technically, this is the approval, and then we just have time to write it up and get the writing
So-
piece, but this is the approval.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fire in the hole. All right. Next. Yeah, the shoreland.
The last item of new business on the agenda is William and Lisa Risbara, 24 Meadow Lane, map 43, lot 3, shoreland zoning application to demolish an existing dwelling and build a new single-family dwelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nancy St. Clair. I'm with St. Clair Associates. I saw most of you folks at the site walk a little while ago today. Appreciate you coming out and taking a look at the site. We're here tonight to seek approval for a shoreland zone permit for William and Lisa Risbara at 24 Meadow Lane. The property is currently improved with an existing structure that is a grandfathered, non-conforming structure on a grandfathered, non-conforming lot of record. As part of our program, we are looking to tear down the existing building and build a new home for the applicants on the property. As part of that program, the building will shift back further away from the lake. The stakes that were out in the field were the ones that we showed you that show the placement of the house in the context of the existing site improvements. We're here tonight to discuss with you folks any specific questions that you may have on the property, and certainly would open up to any questions that you may have.
Scott, any comments you want to add about this?
I think this was a very well-documented application. I don't have it up here on the board, but I think they'll probably have plans for your hard copy. That we did get, for public's interest, some updated plans, slightly adjusting location of the septic system to make sure that it does not impinge on the abuttering driveway that crosses across the site. So those concerns have hopefully been addressed. And the only outstanding item that I propose to conclude, condition on, aside from our boilerplate, is that as they get a more concrete idea of exactly what trees will be impacted by this site before they pull building permits, they need to talk to CEO about a replanting plan for any of the significant trees as required under the shoreline zoning ordinance. Aside from that, I think this is pretty straightforward.
Open up to the board for comments, questions?
Yeah, thank you again for the site walk and answering our questions on site. The reforestation is one of the things that did come up to with several of us, is that we did notice a number of trees, both, in a sense, right on the property line, because of the restructuring, I counted over 20 that would probably most likely, have to go. So reforestation was, a big concern to Mr. Hastings' point. So that was the only thing I was concerned with, but it's been addressed.
So there needs to be a reforestation plan to submit.
That's correct. We certainly are aware of that. What we'd like to be able to do is actually be able to pull the building permit, look at the trees that are on the site, and establish what we can save. If we can save them, we certainly will, as we indicated during the site visit. But for those that were identified that have to come down as part of the earthwork, we would establish a program that would do a replanting plan for those that would be lost.
Okay. Other questions? Carol?
I would say, like, ordinarily, I would be fine with that. But I'm uncomfortable with that in this instance, just because of the obvious number of trees. And to me, that really impacts the whole area, not only on your site, but everywhere else. So I guess I'd be concerned to hear about others, but like, I understand the need for some of those to go, but where you're pushing that back from the beach into the wooded area, and then your septic is the wooded area, and then your garage is the wooded area, I just have a lot of concerns about that, and I think it would be important to see a plan. I mean, I think now, me, not even being a professional, can tag a lot of those trees.
So I understand your thoughts and your concerns. One of the things that you have to kind of strike a balance is we are pulling back from the resource. So
Right.
when we do that, we end up being in an area that did have some trees in it. There are a number of trees, and I'm sure you saw them as part of the site walk, that aren't in very good shape and wouldn't be helpful to save. I was looking when we were out there sort of at the front of the camp where the beach area is on either side. There are some existing trees that we wouldn't anticipate would have to come down. So I think that there are some that will be able to be saved. And certainly with your thoughts and concerns, and the applicant is actually here tonight. He's in the back row there. Mr. Risbera is here. He wasn't able to participate in the site walk. But he understands that he wants to have a nice property. He wants to have nice buffering between the homes as well. And certainly there are some that will have to come down. And we can't make everything perfect and keep everything the same when we do have to balance everything else. So I'd like to be able to have an opportunity to prepare that plan, to assess what trees have to come down as part of that work. And then those that have to come down, we would look at a program that would be able to find some additional landscaping that would help to restore some of those areas.
I already told you how I felt.
Understand?
Yeah.
Scott, who would review that plan, the CEO, at this point?
Yeah, typically what the board has done and what my memo anticipated, or at least recommended, is that there be a condition here that prior to the building permits, the CEO approves that plan, and that's what we've done with most of the applications that come forward. He's the most familiar with the requirements of the ordinance for that, and he deals with diseased trees that have to come down and other reasons, any reason that a tree might be taken down that's separate from tree harvesting and needs a replanting plan. He's the one that does that, so he's the best person qualified to review those plans.
If I could just follow up on one of the comments that Mr. Hastings had made, and that is with regard to the modification of the septic system shape. We discussed it in the field. There is an abutter's driveway that does cross over the tip of the property. And so as a result of the discussions with the abutters and attempts to be a good neighbor, what we have done is modified the shape of that bed, as we showed you on the plans that were presented on the sidewalk. And maybe you have that over there? Not sure if you all can see it, but that is the plan that shows the chambers within the bed. And if you look at the one that's up on the screen, it's simple square. And this one takes and breaks it down into chambers, notches it in and kind of pushes it around, morphs it a bit in order to be able to accommodate not putting any chambers or any fill within that existing encroachment on the corner of the property. So that is a modification that we had made as a result of comments that we'd received from our neighbor. And so we presented that to you folks, and we'd like to have that included as part of the record tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any other board questions before we open it up to the public? I make a motion to open this up to the public.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Public.
It's okay.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm Deborah McLean. My grandfather built the cottage that's to the left of this, the upper part of what you're seeing there, 85 years ago. So we have been taxpayers of Standish, but happy residents there for a long time. I'm interested in your questions about trees because the building is actually 10 feet on both sides from the property line. So where those new plantings would go would be curious to me. The building that's there now is 30 by 24, and I know you guys have probably seen all of this. The new home will be 51 by 47 and a half. So the building that's there now has about 720 square feet on the 2 floors. The new house will have 2,422. It will have 5 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. This is a big, big home. As the abutter, I look at this and wonder, are folks, you know, is this a summer home for somebody? It's going to be year-round. Is it a year-round home for somebody? Is this going to be a rental property? When you look at the actual floor plans, each one of the 5 bedrooms, 4 of them have king-size beds. One of them has a king-size bed and a twin bed, and the other bedroom has bunk beds in it. Each one of those bedrooms has a full bath, and there are 2 other partial baths, one off the garage and one off another room downstairs. It's just such a big, big building compared to what's been there historically, compared to these little camps that were built 85 years ago. And I wonder if it's the right sort of building for that area, if in fact building this gorgeous big house 10 feet from the property lines on a lot that's 75 feet wide is really the right placement for that. Beautiful house, no question. Is this the right place for it to be? And certainly, I can't imagine, honestly, where you would put any sort of reforestation, because literally, you're within 10 feet of the property line. You're going to have to you have to be planting trees that could never grow, that could never be within, you know, never really realistically do what you want them to do. I am so supportive of people doing what they want to do with their land. I am so worried about what this giant home will do to the end of Harmon's Beach. It's just so different from anything that's there now. It's so different from a camp or even a regular family home in that part of Sebago. Thank you for listening. These are my concerns. I want to be a good neighbor too. I know that Reg on the other side wants to be a good neighbor. We're just scared to death of what this giant house will mean to our properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cecilia Guacia. I am an attorney, and I'm here on behalf of the abutters on the other side of the property. I believe that they communicated with you. They are at, on the other side, it's Reggie and Dawn Clark. And I won't take too much of your time because a lot of their concerns have been voiced beautifully by the neighbors on the other side. I do appreciate the Clarks originally contacted me because of the concerns regarding the driveway, and they did send to me today a plan. Thank you very much. That indicates that that has been taken care of, and so they're very relieved in that regard. They too do have concerns. Similarly, they're similarly situated in terms of their family camp, decades of ownership. Their cottage is 466 square feet. Typically, when they're there, there's one car there, so they're concerned about the proximity of the neighboring property now to their property in terms of noise, light, trees, all of the same concerns that they can express better than I, because obviously I'm not a resident of Standish and I don't live there. But I hope that the depth of my client's concern is reflected by the fact that they asked me to come here tonight because they are out of state. I don't have anything more to say.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to comment from the public? Or from you? Yeah, please.
Well, we certainly do not acknowledge that the new home will be different than the existing home. But we also want to point out the fact that the existing residence has an outbuilding that is within the side yard setback on the property. The proposed new building does meet the requirements for the side yard setbacks for the property. We are not asking for any reduction or waiver or any sort of relief on the standards for the setbacks for the property. We have very carefully evaluated what the requirements are for the size of the structure, both in the height of the structure as well as the standards for expansion which are allowed in the shoreline zone. As your application package shows, we've demonstrated that we've pulled the building back, that we've met the standards, and although it is different, although it is a change, it is within the ordinance requirements that are appropriate for this zone. So I'd like to just highlight that for you
Okay,
folks.
thank you. Any other comments from the public? I make a motion then to close the public comments.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Further comments from the board?
So the side setbacks are 15 feet, correct?
It says 10.
That's what they were when we were down there before. They were
Yeah, it
15
says
feet
10
off
on
the
the
side
plan.
setbacks.
So our ordinance is 15?
That's what it was when we had, when we were down there for the last,
The last one, yeah.
that last one.
Is it the same zone?
It's the same, yeah, is it,
Yeah,
sorry,
it's
the
like
zone,
right down
zoning.
the street.
There's the provision for the non-conforming lots of record, and I'm not gonna be able to pull it out of the ordinance off the top of my head.
But when you have a tear down, you're making your new structure to
Yeah,
conform
but
with
the
this.
lot itself, not the structure, the lot is not conforming. It's smaller than allowed per the ordinance, so it's a non-conforming lot, the non-conforming lots of record, rather reduce the setback.
Searchable PDF.
Yeah, that was what I remember I told you, like, hey, I need a PDF. These need to send them.
And that's what they put on the plans when they note a 15-foot setback, and then they note a non-conforming lot of record. And like I said, I'm not gonna be able to pull the code reference off the top of my head.
So this is 23712, relocation.
Knew she was gonna make me do it. Shoreline.
Well, while they're doing that,
Yeah, Andrew, while we
what-
look.
was there any consideration on this project moving the driveway, the neighbor's driveway further down to make that situation permanently better?
As part of the communication with the neighbor, the applicant had offered that there were a couple of options that might be available.
Yeah.
One of which was he agreed that he would look at adjusting his site so that it could remain in place. The other alternative was if that didn't work, that they would offer to reconstruct a new driveway at their cost, the applicant's cost, for the abutting property on
Right.
their property.
Right, okay.
So the neighbor chose this option.
The applicant chose to pursue this option
Pursue this
because they had a solution, and hopefully it's something that's amenable to the board and all parties.
And does there need to be any type of easement generated to help with future use and negotiating?
That hasn't been discussed at this
Okay.
point. This is something that came sort of at the last minute out of the woodwork.
Bill Risbara, 24 Meadow Lane. They actually have prescriptive rights to that driveway, so they've got as much right as I do to that driveway. They've driven over for over 20 years. I recognize that, didn't
Okay.
want to upset them. We've worked really hard and fast, so I put this under contract December 9th, bought it January 6th. We had a full application in, 42-page application to get this torn down. My goal was that I don't upset my neighbors, so I'm trying to pull the permit this week to crush and put a foundation, put the well in, put the foundation, and get going, so that by Memorial Day, I literally don't have anything going on the outside. Regards to the landscaping, until we get in there and know what the well drill needs and the foundation, what have you, I just, to waste the money on a plan seems crazy to me. I'm willing to cut a $20,000 check and put it in the town's escrow account to guarantee that I'm gonna do my landscaping, but I'd rather be working that out with staff after we know what we really need to have. And I plan on having a robust landscaping plan, so,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Any progress over there?
I'm working. Carolyn and I are working.
Yeah.
Hey, searchable PDFs, Andrew, remember like the whole point of like having
Yeah,
searchable
well, I
PDFs?
mean, if you had some Google glasses or something, maybe you could do
Yeah,
that.
it's all right, like, you know, the case is that,
Our understanding is that it is a 10-foot side yard setback because it is a non-conforming lot of record.
And I think because it is a tear down, that changes it. Not that you're changing the structure, it's a complete tear down, so in order to make it more conforming, you're supposed to still go by the setbacks. But I could be wrong, I'd like to just find that.
Understood. Appreciate that.
found a non-conforming lot, found all the things, but,
I think it has to be under this reconstruction.
yeah, sorry, this is, got it all. Non-conformance, but I just don't see the
So
time.
237-12.
Yeah.
Okay, so here it is.
Look under,
You got it? Yeah,
I've got it. It's actually. it's
I
not
figured you
in
would find it,
shoreline.
just,
So the side, shoreland covers the setbacks off the water.
correct.
And it counts as sort of an overlay district to our underlying zoning, which in this case is the rural zone. And that covers your, like, the front off the road setback and the side and rear setbacks. And in the rural zone is, 181. 5, setbacks are under subsection, let's see, goes for, depending on lot size, you had F, G, H, I, but then you get down to, here we go, to L. Non-conforming lots in existence prior to May 1976 are allowed minimum setbacks of 20 feet off the front and 10 feet off the side and rear.
See searchable PDFs.
what was that before? This is very inconsistent.
Nailed it.
So is that settled? It's 10 feet?
I think that's very inconsistent than what we did last time. Just saying.
I hear you. I remember it being 15.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and we had 15 feet, we put it in the,
So 15 feet is the side setback for lots that are under 20,000 square feet. But if it's this pre-May 1976 non-conforming lot of record, then it's a further 5-foot reduction to 10 feet.
Mr. Chairman, if I might add, we did have a meeting with the code enforcement officer early on in the process for that, and that was a part of the discussion about the nonconformity, so.
Okay.
well, what I'm reading right here is in determining whether building relocation meets the setback to the greatest extent possible.
And what that setback is set out in the rural zone, and that's the 10 feet for these lots prior to 1976, which are non-conforming.
So where did the 15 feet come from the
15
previous?
feet is in this zone, lots under 20,000 square feet that are not non-conforming lots of record, pre-1976.
Okay.
That was a non-conforming lot, that was old.
I mean, the applicant at that time did not have a providence, they didn't want to push that 10 feet, so we went with the 15 feet because that's the setback for those size lots in that zone.
Sorry, Kim, another lot, different from the
We've done quite a few of these shoreline
sorry.
tear down. We're not, this isn't our first.
I think it's my third, at least.
I must be pushing 10 in the last 4 years.
I've only been here since June of last
So-
year, so that's,
Any further discussion?
Nope.
Thank you. Then I move to find the application of the reconstruction of the legally non-conforming house at 24 Meadow Lane, the application to be complete.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
I'm a no.
I didn't see your hand.
She's a no,
She's
sorry.
a no.
3 1 nay.
One no. Any further comments from the board before I move forward?
No.
Move the board grant approval under the provisions of the Standish Land Use Code for the application submitted by St. Clair Associates on behalf of William and Lisa Risbara for the removal and replacement of a legally non-conforming house at 24 Meadow Lane in Standish, having found the application to meet the requirements of 237-12, 237-15, 237-16, and all the other applicable sections of the Standish Code of Ordinance with the following conditions. All work will be in conformance with materials and plans submitted by St. Clair Associates, which consist of site plans, building elevations, and supporting application. This approval shall lapse and become void in 1 year as laid out in 237-16. The CEO will approve a replanting plan for significant trees removed, if any, as part of the project prior to the issuance of the building permit. Per standards found in 237-12C.1.b, the planning board approval of the site is limited to structure setbacks to the maximum practical extent. The new structure will be set back from the apparent normal high water line by approximately 63.5 feet. And this represents a practical relocation as allowed under the ordinance. This approval is dependent upon and limited to the proposals and plans contained in the application and supporting documents submitted and affirmed by the applicant or the applicant's agent, either orally or in writing, that any variation from the plans, proposals, and supporting documents are subject to review and approval by the planning board, except for minor changes which the code enforcement officer may approve.
I'll second, as stated.
Is all in favor? One no.
One no.
One no.
Very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I make a motion to adjourn.
He seconded it that time.
Is all in
Patrick.
favor?
Hey, just as
Done.
long as Jackie knows which one is which.